Auguries of Innocence by William Blake, with prologue. Auguries of Innocence is a poem by William Blake, allegedly discovered in a notebook of his, which is now officially known as the Pickering manuscript. Yeah. That's one of my favorite poems, especially the first stanza or verse, because to me it is very comparable to the psychotropic or psychedelic experience or astral travel or inner experiences that Buddhist monks may have in jhanic meditation, Zen or dhyana, which means absorption to the point where you seal off all sensory perception, and you can then, it's like altered states in one of those sensory deprivation chambers where you start to either hallucinate or have visions. Hallucinate insinuates it's not real, but even quantum physicists say that maybe this universe we're living in a simulation, quantum mechanics in the moment, or a holographic simulation. Anyway, Auguries of Innocence, the poem by William Blake, it is full of symbolism, and that if you have not had curiosity in your life to study certain things apart from etymology and ancient Old English, and to know about the politics and the situation of the time, of what could be spoken freely and what could not, and how you had to hide your meaning behind words, which is, you can find this issue spoken about in the works of the author who is allegedly known as William Shakespeare, but there is argument that he might have been somebody, it might have been a pseudonym anyway. Shakespeare, also a great writer. William Blake was an artist, a poet, a writer, and he was born and brought up in a Christian way, but he developed a very different view on things. So, this one of his many poems, and paintings and great works of all sorts of types, some of them bordering on being magical grimoires and spiritual revelations more than literature. But so to analyze the poem would be good if you know symbology and you know the history of the time and what he might be referring to using metaphor. Then you may find that this poem has very deep spiritual knowledge and knowledge of the world back then and now, of how it works, because it works the same way then as it does now, because the system controlling it then is the same system that still controls it now. That's for another day. So, Auguries of Innocence, found in the Pickering manuscript. Nobody really knows when it was written, but apparently in the year 1803. Not sure, but definitely published in 1863, after 1863. Until then, no knowledge of its publication. So it was a great discovery, really, in a way. And it was discovered in the companion volume to Alexander Gilchrist's biography of William Blake. So, the poem itself, it's composed of a set of paradoxes. If you know what a paradox is, Google it. And the paradoxes refer to innocence, juxtaposed, which means cross-referenced with evil and corruption, or juxtaposed means placed across the table from evil and corruption, and is about 132 lines long, and divided into stanzas. And it's called the Auguries of Innocence. If you don't know what an augury is, it means a sign or an omen, a good or bad omen, or some prophecy, for foretelling. Like in Time Magic, we have the Progressive Ghost. He will whisper to Ghost Whisperer. He will give you forewarning. So it's a forewarning, like a comet used to be forewarning of bad events or something. So it is an omen. Auguries of Innocence, omens of innocence. And I shall now recite, I believe, the poem, if I can. If I can. So here we go. The first stanza is my favourite, and if you've ever read the books of Carlos Castaneda, or you have experienced the psychedelic or psychotropic experience that the hippies in the 60s had, and Timothy Leary and Professor Dr. Albert Hoffman, who invented LSD, or people who've tried shamanism with ayahuasca, then they will resonate very much with this first verse and stanza. And before I say it, I'd just like to say I've published one more poem previously on my Ajahn Spencer YouTube channel, for which I'm known more for Buddhism, amulets, Buddhist Vipassana meditation, and a bit of occult, anti-occult, but known less for non-Buddhist things. And people commented on that poem I did, which was There is no religion, all religions are one, part 1 from William Blake. There's a second part to be published. People were saying, why do you publish this on your channel? So, well, because wisdom and knowledge is not to be found just hidden in Buddhism. It is not actually hidden. If you know where to look, it's everywhere, including in this poem. So here we go. To see a world, I'll start again. Auguries of Innocence by William Blake. To see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wild flower. To hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. A robin redbreast in a cage puts all heaven in a rage. A dove house filled with doves and pigeons shudders hell through all its regions. A dog starved at his master's gate predicts the ruin of the state. A horse misused upon the road calls to heaven for human blood. Each outcry of the hunted hare a fibre from the brain does tear. A skylark wounded in the wing a cherubim does cease to sing. The gamecock clipped and armed for fight does the rising sun affright. Every wolf's and lion's howl raises from hell a human soul. The wild deer wandering here and there keeps the human soul from care. The lamb misused breeds public strife and yet forgives the butcher's knife. The bat that flits at close of eve has left the brain that won't believe. The owl that calls upon the night speaks the unbeliever's fright. He who shall hurt the little wren shall never be beloved by men. He who the ox to wrath has moved shall never be by woman loved. The wanton boy that kills the fly shall feel the spider's enmity. He who torments the chafer's sprite weaves a bower in endless night. The caterpillar on the leaf repeats to thee thy mother's grief. Kill not the moth nor butterfly, for the last judgment draweth nigh. He who shall train the horse to war shall never pass the polar bar. The beggar's dog and widow's cat, feed them and thou wilt grow fat. The gnat that sings his summer's song poison gets from slander's tongue. The poison of the snake and newt is the sweat of envy's foot. The poison of the honeybee is the artist's jealousy. The prince's robes and beggar's rags are toadstools on the miser's bags. A truth that's told with bad intent beats all the lies you can invent. It is right it should be so, for man was made for joy and woe. And when this we rightly know, thro' the world we safely go. Joy and woe are woven fine, a clothing for the soul divine. Under every grief and pine runs a joy with silken twine. The babe is more than swaddling bands. Throughout all these human lands, tools were made, and born were hands. Every farmer understands. Every tear from every eye becomes a babe in eternity. This is caught by females bright, and returned to its own delight. The bleat, the bark, bellow, and roar are waves that beat on heaven's shore. The babe that weeps the rod beneath writes revenge in realms of death. The beggar's rags, fluttering in air, does to rags the heavens tear. The soldier armed with sword and gun, palsied strikes the summer's sun. The poor man's farthing is worth more than all the gold on Afric's shore. One mite wrung from the labourer's hands shall buy and sell the miser's lands. Or if protected from on high, does that whole nation sell and buy? He who mocks the infant's faith shall be mocked in age and death. He who shall teach the child to doubt, the rotting grave shall ne'er get out. He who respects the infant's faith triumphs over hell and death. The child's toys and the old man's reasons are the fruits of the two seasons. The questioner who sits so sly shall never know how to reply. He who replies to words of doubt doth put the light of knowledge out. The strongest poison ever known came from Caesar's laurel crown. Naught can deform the human race like to the armour's iron brace. When gold and gems adorn the plough, to peaceful arts shall envy bow. A riddle or the cricket's cry is to doubt a fit reply. The emmet's inch and eagle's mile make lame philosophy to smile. He who doubts from what he sees will ne'er believe, do what you please. If the sun and moon should doubt, they'd immediately go out. To be in a passion you good may do, but no good if a passion is in you. The whore and gambler by the state licensed build that nation's fate. The harlot's cry from street to street shall weave old England's winding sheet. The winners shout the loser's curse, dance before dead England's hearse. Every night and every morn, some to misery are born. Every morn and every night, some are born to sweet delight. Some are born to sweet delight, and some are born to endless night. We are led to believe a lie when we see not through the eye, which was born in a night to perish in a night, when the soul slept in beams of light. God appears, and God is light to those poor souls who dwell in night, but does a human form display to those who dwell in realms of day. From William Blake. Yeah. And that was it, the Auguries of Innocence from William Blake. And if you want to read it, I think if you Wikipedia it, Auguries of Innocence, you'll find it. And you can probably find the whole poem online. I personally would like to dedicate this particular podcast for YouTube to my older brother, Paul, for donating / giving me as a present a book he knew I used to have and have missed for decades, which is the complete works of William Blake, and his artworks and poems and writings, and what I would say prophecies and spiritual insights, and works of genius, of poetic genius. And in fact, William Blake speaks of the poetic genius within man and its nature. And that's a very important part of his spiritual message, which, although he was officially Christian, lived in times in England when you couldn't be anything much different. He was a God-believing person, but I would say he was more, people say gnostic, agnostic. I don't see much difference between the two in a way, even though they're opposed, but more of the kind of agnostic type of view. And you will find that if you're interested in the Hermetic traditions, Hermetic magical traditions of Hermes Trismegistus, or the later version of Egyptian Thoth, or the later version of Mercury, the Roman version of the Greeks, and after the Greeks, the Romans developed into a different name. But actually, 5,000 years ago, the oldest name we can find originating was Hermes Trismegistus. So those who study that, the Hermetic tradition, those who may be involved in the craft, which means also Hermetic in a sense, Freemasonry or Rosicrucianism, and who know the symbolism and the interpretations of symbolism and how to interpret metaphor, because those traditions teach you how to do that. They use the language of symbolism, yeah, and also mystery play. Not the type of mystery play like the medieval Christian mystery plays, like the York, those kinds of plays, rather mystery theatre as part of your initiation processes. Mystery school, there are mystery schools by some people. I wouldn't say that. I would say they're a very, very highly developed systems of initiation which lead through to should lead through to realizations. Unfortunately, you can't really. You can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make him drink, which means if just becoming a Buddhist monk or a Illuminati, Adamais helps Illuminati, if you believe that exists, or a Hermeticist, or an alchemist, or you encounter the teaching, you encounter what is actually not hidden and available to anybody, but you have to dig, be it the alchemy of Saint Germain or shamanism, as found in South America and Central America, and shamanism in China, in Southeast Asia, or Egyptian occultism, and you will find anybody who's studied any of these traditions may find themselves able to understand lots within the Auguries of Innocence from William Blake. But especially, I would say those who might understand the most would be those of Hermetic and Masonic, and just of symbolists, and people who are into sacred geometry, and people who are into etymology. But most definitely Hermetic and Masonically trained people with knowledge of those traditions and knowledge of British history, and know about William Blake and the times he lived in, and the political situation, the situation with monarchy, the situation with the Vatican, and Protestants and Catholics, and I don't know what. You have to think about, if you want to communicate something like on the internet today, if you phrase something wrongly, you get censored by artificial intelligence. In those days you didn't. You got arrested and beheaded, which is why many of William Shakespeare's play, and another play that was very unpopular with the elite and the bourgeoisie in Great Britain was The Beggar's Opera, because it was not just a low-class kind of theatre compared to the snobby elite. It was also political criticism of those in power, so and of society and so on, rules of society and blah blah. So it was kind of activism hidden behind poetry and theatre. And so you should look for that. And if you know English history and you know this era, you should look that. Because if you read something like a robin redbreast in a cage puts all heaven in a rage, yeah, who is the robin redbreast? Or the wanton boy that kills the fly shall feel the spider's enmity. Well, spiders eat flies, so if you kill a fly, a spider isn't going to consider you his friend. Same as if somebody kills a gecko in my house, I don't think that's good, because geckos eat mosquitoes that give you malaria, and so they're actually friends in your house. So that could be as simple as that. But actually, does the wanton boy refer to, for example, not in this case, but if it was a time of history when there was a boy emperor, for example, or somebody in power who was still not of age. Sometimes somebody inherits an empire or a kingdom and they're not of age. That might be a wanton boy. It's just an example, right? That kills the fly. So who's the fly? And who is the spider? Because they're probably metaphors referring to certain people of high standing or institutions of great power of the time, or the actions of selfish people, or perhaps government. You have to look, yeah? Just to sign off, I would say that the last lines of the poem, of course, are quoted in the film Dead Man, and in the novel by Agatha Christie called Endless Night, which I believe was written in around 1960s, late 60s. And it was also part of a Jim Morrison song from The Doors, but he made the album himself without The Doors. It's a solo album. And he does actually say these lines: some are born to sweet delight and some are born to endless night, yeah? So you can also hear those lines from William Blake in one of the songs from Jim Morrison and The Doors. It is Jim Morrison and The Doors, but they published it after Jim Morrison died. So there you go. William Blake, one of my early inspirations during my late teens and early 20s, when I became involved very deeply and curious about the Western Hermetic occult traditions and, yes, Masonic style traditions and Solomonic Hermetic magic, and the works of Tennyson and Blake, the poets, the great poets of those times, Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein and stuff, and H.P. Lovecraft and stuff. They just seem to be part of the niche that Hermetic and occult niches that these kinds of literature, apart from the proper literature such as the complete works of the Golden Dawn by Israel Regardie, which have also a long time ago had and almost completed. That was a book about as thick as a bull's leg, top thigh. It must have been 1,600 pages, and it was A4 size and hardback. Shame I lost it. If I can ever see that book again, I'll buy it. And so, there you go. If anybody's interested in Hermeticism, I'm been trying to finish a documentary about Rosicrucianism, Rosicrucians and such traditions, which I hope to title what is it? The biggest publicity stunt of all time. And just if anybody's interested, keep your eye out for that and subscribe so you'll know when it comes. But don't press the bell because then you'll get hassled with notifications. Or just visit my channel every month or two if you like this kind of stuff. I'm not just into Buddhism. And for those who just want Buddhism and amulets, I'd like to say I'm sorry that I talk about other things, but there's a lot of things I would like to share with everybody. My knowledge and my curiosity and my interests are wider than that in life. So, John Spencer with the Auguries of Innocence, recited and explained in relative depth. Hoping you liked it. Signing off.